Hello, everyone. My name is Zeph, and welcome to the Star Network podcast. Today, we have with us a special guest, Folake Edun, the CEO and co-founder of Towntalk Solutions. Hello, Folake. How are you today?
Hi, Zeph. I'm so happy to be here on the Star Network podcast. Thank you for inviting me.
Great. I'm super excited to have you because I particularly love what you and your team are building with Towntalk Solutions. So Towntalk, as I know it, is a data intelligence company that essentially just builds a risk management framework for businesses across security, agriculture, logistics. We have you here. So why don't you tell us more about the product? How has it evolved over time? How does it actually work?
As you mentioned, we're a data intelligence company, so we very much focus on data. A lot of the data that we collect is data that affects your safety and mobility. So any decisions you have to make in terms of, I want to go from point A to point B, I want to travel here, I want to move my goods. Those risks that you face, that is what we're trying to solve with our data. So the data includes traffic incidents, security incidents, weather information, and then we add contextual data around identity and also any client specific data, just to add more context around it. So what we do is that we crowdsource this data and we pull it from multiple sources. We use technology, mainly AI-based machine learning, to provide products that help our clients manage their risks all across the supply chain. We started off with security. But what we found was that a lot of the clients, especially those supply chain operators like logistic companies, manufacturers, agriculture companies, they have so many risks that they face when they're like manufacturing their goods, warehousing them, moving them. And we looked at our database and we're like, we can help them manage more of these risks than just the security aspect. And so what we do is that we look at the risks our clients face and we see from the data we have, and for the data that's already out there, how do we build more products to actually serve more of that risk? And that's how we see ourselves continuing to evolve.
Oh no, okay, that's amazing. And it's so funny just hearing about it. I feel like Towntalk is such a I don't want to use the word an outlier, but it's how you're able to gather all that information and help businesses to operate efficiently. So when you said even just moving goods from point A to B, when I think of logistics services, so a truck is carrying goods from Enugu and is driving to Lagos. And what you find sometimes is that, the truck has collapsed, there's a pothole, there's this risk incident, and then there's so much traffic. And then the customer at the end can actually receive the product in time. And it's interesting that your business is built around that to say, look, in this particular region, there's traffic or there is a road construction. I feel it's actually phenomenal. I don't think that we have enough data intelligence aggregator around things like this. So to hear that Towntalk is doing this is amazing. But I want to ask you more around just partnerships. So we've heard about what Towntalk does, but in terms of just partnerships, because when we spoke, you mentioned how when you joined the Towntalk Solutions team, you first started off simply as an investor. And now you rose to the top as CEO. And I think people who are listening would definitely love to hear that. So they see startups, they want to invest in it, or they don't know whether to actually be part of that team. So what are the key learning points that you can share with us?
I was trying to move back to Nigeria. As you know, I used to work at Deloitte as a consultant. So I was looking for a very similar type of role. So I applied to control risks. I didn't hear back. And so typical, you're trying to get a response. I Googled Lagos email address and I got one random email address, resent my application to that email address, and apparently went to everybody in the office.
Gosh.
At the time, we always say that our partnership was ordained by God, because how we met, none of us knew each other before we started working together. So Tomiwa and Disu were at the same company and they received my CV. And so they reached out independently a couple of months later. They were like, they're working on some interesting, it was the most vague email ever. When I go back to it, I'm like, what made me respond to this? They're working on something interesting and they think based on my skill set, they saw my CV when I sent it in, it'll be worth having a conversation. So I just checked their LinkedIn profiles. I saw that they had some common people. So I was like, there's no harm in it. I was also thinking personally, I'm moving back to Nigeria. My social life and everything is still in London. I don't have anything to do here. So I saw it more as something to spend my time doing. And so we had a conversation via Skype. It seemed to go well. I was interested in what they were working on. And then when I came to Nigeria, we met up and we just clicked.
everything, our conversations, and it's the same dynamic we have 5 years later now. The three of us think very, very differently, but we all have it's like we all have the same end goal, but the way we think about reaching the end is very different, but we're very respectful of each other's point of view. And so the first hurdle we always have with every decision we make is convincing each other before we now take it outside. So we started off, we then decided to like put things down on paper. Because the guys essentially thought of this idea initially themselves, they were like, okay, they'll give me, I can't remember, it was like either 10 or 17%. I mean, I was happy with whatever. I was like, this is just a pastime activity. But as things evolved and as we got busier, a year later, all of us left our jobs. And then we were fundraising. And then I sat back and I was like, this is now my full-time hustle. Now I'm still, the ownership structure does not reflect that. So I had a conversation with the guys and I was like, this company has come a long way from when I joined. And obviously it has a lot to do with my involvement as well. So I think we need to equalize based on sweat, but also I wanted to contribute financially as well. Also, because we were fundraising, we needed the money. So I was like, you know what, this is what I can do financially. And I think the rest can be balanced by sweat equity. And so they discussed amongst themselves, we agreed, and that's how I became an equal partner.
Oh my God. I mean, that's an incredible story. Yeah. I feel like what I'm hearing is just the ability to take a risk. You absolutely had nothing to lose. It's very easy to just move back to Nigeria. And I'm hearing there's a very common thread here, that it's whenever people move back home, it's like the door just opens for opportunities and people are a bit more daring. They're willing to explore partnerships that they wouldn't have gotten themselves into. So in your risk taking, you have found the best team. And the second thing, Folake, that you said that I absolutely love is that your teammates and yourself, you're very different, extremely different. But the ability to just respect one another. And I think people are always trying to figure out, how do I know when to partner with someone? Because you can be intelligent, but is this going to be a good partnership in the long term? And the third thing that I really appreciate that you said is that after a year, you were able to reflect at your own individual contribution and say, okay, guys, actually need more. I like the boldness that you took, that, it's very easy just as women for us to like shy away from that conversation of like, I can't really be bothered, or they started it before me. And look at you today, you're the CEO. So kudos, that's amazing. Yeah. But let's even talk more about the outstanding work that you're doing. I mean, that recognition has taken you guys so far to the point that last year you got into ARM Techstars, the accelerator program. And, I see it online, and I'm sure like other people who are aspiring to do great things, they always wonder, how do I get into these accelerator programs, whether it's Y Combinator or ARM Labs? How is it done? Can you share some key learnings for us? What was that experience like? And what would you advise to someone who wants to apply and they just don't know where to begin?
Yeah. So I think Techstars came at a very good time for us. We've spent a lot of time doing this stuff by ourselves, trying to navigate and figure it out by ourselves. And we just needed some hand-holding in terms of how do we really think about product market fit? How do we really think about how we structure the business internally? When we applied, we were very, very clear on the outcomes that we wanted to get out of the program. And I think that's the biggest advice that I give to anyone that's applying. You could get lost, and you shouldn't be too precious about the solution you're building, because pivots are very, very common. But you should just be very, very clear about exactly what you want to get out, because it's very flexible in the way that, okay, if they're not having enough sessions on market sizing or something, and that is something that you need to fully understand, you raise it, because that's something that you know that you need as a business. And so they will make sure that they put in sessions for that. If you need a mentor for us, okay, we're going into the logistics space to serve that industry. We wanted to talk to people that are within that industry just to get more insights. So you reach out and you're like, okay, I need to speak to specific people that do business in this space so that we know how to reach the market. So you just have to be very, very clear and direct about what you want. In terms of applying, as I mentioned, don't be too precious about your solution. It's more about your thinking, about how you've thought about the business, about the problem, etc. And very, very strongly, it's about you. They spend a lot of time asking you about your motivations, looking at the dynamics of the team. And so for us, we're very, very particular about whenever we have pitches, etc., that there are specific questions that everyone knows that they are. So I answer questions more on strategy, on business, on on like legal stuff, etc. When it comes to stuff to do with the technology, we have a CTO to answer that. When it comes to like our go-to-market strategies or our sales approach or operations, we have a COO that does that. And so in any conversation, you can see how things are already split without us being vocal about the split of responsibilities. So it's very focused on you as an individual and how you've really thought about the business. So
no, that's amazing. And I mean, you sort of hear these things, but I like that you really emphasize that the conversation on team structure is very critical. Like they actually look at your team to see, is this actually a good fit? Can these people actually build what they say that they're going to build? And is there sustainability in the way that they work? Yeah. I like that you sort of outlined that there is need for segmentation. Like it's just clear the CTO will talk about the tech work. You as a strategy person will come in. And it's very easy sometimes for people to get those lines a bit blurry because there's no structure. So what I'm hearing is, before you go into these pitches, let's say be clear that there is division of labor and this is how you then unify to actually make it work. Now that's amazing for like, and I didn't even realize that you said with the Techstars Accelerator, was this your first or had you guys done other like pitches?
No, this was our first accelerator. Wow. So we've never been keen on accelerators. We actually applied to YC. We interviewed, this was like 2 years ago, and we didn't get in, but I don't think we were ready at that point. I think Techstars happened when like the timing was right for us.
Would you say from the experience it was worth it in terms of like the things, the benefits?
It was
definitely something people should go for.
Yeah, it was definitely worth it. And I think we were in the first cohort in Lagos, so the first on the ground cohort in Lagos. And the big difference there is that the connections you need to execute business, you're able to get them from the program because you have people on the ground. Yeah, it's partnered with ARM who have like connections to so many businesses. So if you say, oh, you need to talk to someone in Polaris or EcoBank or whatever, they have those connections. They can bring them in to have conversations on the topic that you want to do business about. And so, so having that on the ground network was very, very powerful and very useful. Yeah.
Oh, amazing. No, thank you for sharing that. And I'm sure my audience is going to appreciate it because sometimes you see startups and they get into programs. And if you're trying, you sort of ask yourself, how are they doing this? So it's just great that you've been able to outline these are the steps. But let's go back to your solution. And I like the aspect of, security awareness, security intelligence. I was just wondering, do you find that in the Nigerian market today that companies actually take that seriously? So for instance, if you say to a business, we notice you have an asset based in Ikorodu, for instance, there is extreme flooding that has been predicted. You either need to start figuring out ways to move that asset in the future, put risk measures in place. Do you find that there is a positive uptake of that data? Do you find that businesses are using it to be more efficient? Or do you find that to convince them of that narrative is still like there's a bit of a gap?
Yeah, there's still a lot of selling and convincing that takes place. I think just in general with data, the stage we're at in Nigeria, so in the West or in like the UK, the US, they understand data is important and they understand how to use that data. So they know how to value it and how to pay for it. But in Nigeria, although there's an understanding now of that data is important, we're not entirely sure how we want to use it. So even the gatekeepers of that data, so a lot of the telcos, etc., they hold it close to their chest because they know it's important, but they're not sure how to use it. So they don't know how to really, really value it. Yeah. With security intelligence and trying to like get people to pay for that information to better their decision making, there's a lot of selling that takes place. And I think that's why we take a step back and look at what is the best way to position it as a product that they can more easily relate with. And so, yes, we have the data, we have the insights, but how do we position it more useful to them? And so it's like what we found is that, yes, we were selling intelligence to them initially. We were selling insurance as well. But what they cared more about or what was easier to start the conversation with was stuff that to manage the risks around their drivers. So a lot of these goods get lost in transit, get stolen, get damaged because of the individual, not because of anything else. And that's something that they're all very much bothered about. So it's a pain point. And so when we're having conversations with them, it's easier to resonate on that angle. And so we're like, okay, we can pull data from existing databases to do background checks on your driver. So you have an underlying risk. And then to carry on with that risk management, we can provide you with reports as they go on routes. We can track those trucks as they move along. And so it helps us just force or introduce these additional products into the story.
No, that's amazing. And it's so funny how like just the peculiarities of our market, it's like forcing your business to like innovate.
Yeah.
And I sort of like that, because then you then find, oh, this is the product that is actually then scaling, etc. But I when I was doing research on Towntalk, I was like, I can imagine that this is such a pain point to like convince people to say this is important. Because as you mentioned, in like high income economies, if there's a hurricane, for instance, or even just flooding, there is going to be an alert, whether it's on the news, whether it's on people's cell phones. Everyone is cross-populating that data so that people mentally prepare. Today, if we get a flooding news or something, I feel like it will definitely take a while for it to digest in the minds of Nigerians, because we're not used to that type of information being shared, and not also just being shared, but also being like prioritized that, this is very critical, you need to take it seriously. So I'm super excited to see like what Towntalk does and all the innovations you come up with.
we are excited too. Nigeria really, you have a plan in place, but the nuances of Nigeria just make you go, it goes like this.
I can't imagine.
Yeah.
Do you feel like a challenge to that could also be the verification of the data? And the thing is, I love data companies, like I love what you guys are building, but do you feel that challenge for them could also be with data verification? So what you said about, maybe people are sending updates and you get people online who are like data aggregators, like on X, etc. But how do you also then verify that data?
So we're very, very particular about verifying data, especially because we do touch on security. You don't want people making decisions based on false news when it comes to security, right? So we have multiple ways that we do it. So first of all, in terms of the type of data that we collect, we have multiple ways of collecting that data. Not all of that is from Towntalk. So some of that is, we have an in-house team that is responsible for pulling data through their networks, the internet, etc. We also pull data from open source APIs, so like weather information, etc. And then identity banks as well. But to verify that data, we use our in-house intelligence team who verify any data that we pull online or anything. They use their network to verify it. And so they can see something on Twitter, they pull it, and then they ask around or ask their network to find out, is this true or not? We're looking to implement more AI capabilities to this when we have more data to do so, but we do those checks in-house. In addition to that, we also have Area, as you know, and one of the features of Area is that as a civilian, you can verify an incident that has been reported around you. And so the intention is that as that grows and as traffic grows on that app, it will become more of a verification tool for us as opposed to a money-making tool.
I think people always try to figure it out. They see information and it's just like, is this actually real? How can I verify this? Or how can I test the credibility of it? But as more people just gather and there's more information, then you can actually then decipher, this is real data, this is just false news. And just before we go into your personal, what would you say has been the most memorable thing for you in building so far?
That's a tough question, because I think we're not very good at yes, we've had some yay moments, but we're not very good at pausing. And so there are two that stick out to me right now. So the first one is our first project we did together. So me and my co-founders, because I just remember we were all moonlighting at that point. So we had our 9-to-5s. We had rented an apartment in 1004. And we'd go there after work. We'd work in the evenings and we work on the weekends. I have a dent in my car from when I fell asleep going home because of how tired I was. But I'm like, I do not want to fix that dent because it gives me, it's like memories, as in how committed I am to this company. So we put in so much work. And so I think the day that we pressed send on that project, we popped champagne. It was like celebration. But I think the reason why it's so memorable to me, because that project was basically, it was elections 2019, and we were predicting how the elections would go for a handful of states. So it was about 16 states or so. And so we did this. We didn't know whether we were predicting correctly or not. And then we get the results and we had over 90% accuracy. And, in a country like Nigeria, with everything that goes on around elections, we were stunned. But it made us realize that, oh my God, we have something here. How do we make a business from this technology? And so I think it was a very, very pivotal point for the business. So that's one I remember. For me personally as well, Techstars. you know how quiet, you know me, so you know how quiet I am.
Very quiet.
And so just the thought of demo day was the most daunting thing for me. So going through that whole experience and then getting to demo day and being on stage with my big belly.
I saw that. And I was laughing.
and yeah, even when I watch it back, I'm like, Folake, you didn't do badly, you know. Like, I have come a long way. So I think those are two memorable moments for me.
No,
yeah.
That's amazing. And then one, I like that you didn't fix the dent in your car. No. Also very similar with this type of memories, because it's like you're going to look back on this and say, yeah, this thing is like significant or something. And that video of you when you went on stage, I saw it online. And I was like, wait, this is Folake. And I was so impressed, because at the time you were pregnant, and I said, how is she doing this? And for me, that feels like I have zero excuse. She's here standing with her belly. So there's absolutely no excuse for no superhero. Well done. But speaking of bellies, let's talk about motherhood. And, congratulations on your two beautiful babies.
Thank you.
I just wanted to ask you, I feel there's a lot of celebration of women's strength, rightly so. But I feel we don't have enough discourse on how women can actually balance parenting and building businesses, right? Because I can imagine that's a full-time job in itself. Yeah. And yes, people say it's a lot. It sounds like a broken record, but it's real. So how are you able to just find that balance, or is there even such a thing as balance, but just navigate motherhood and building a company? How are you able to do that?
This is an interesting question, because as you know, I just had my second. So I'm still figuring stuff out. But I think one thing that has changed in the last few months since I had my second child is that, so obviously I have 3 children. So it's my 2 kids and my startup. Yeah. I have accepted defeat. Seriously, like I cannot, when you have just one child, you can convince yourself that you can do everything. And so I used to burn out a lot. But I feel like I'm happier now. Like I'm managing stuff a little bit better now, because I've accepted that I cannot do it all. Like I have 2 kids that have 2 very different types of needs right now. And then I have a startup that I'm running, and we're at the stage where there's constantly things or fires you're putting out. There's just constantly stuff to do. So before, one of the biggest changes that I've made recently is that before I never had my personal calendar and work calendar in one. And so I'd find myself, I'm going for pickup, or I'm going to the doctor's appointment with my daughter and I'm on a call. And I'm like, I'm not being productive right now, because there's nothing I can contribute. So what I do is I combine my calendars and I don't double book myself. It takes me 30 minutes to pick up my child from school. I can take 30 minutes out of my day. And then on top of that, I find that I think I mentioned to you that I burnt out a lot when I had my first, because I didn't take a break. I did not pause. The intention was to take a break. Like I'd spoken to my team about it. We had thought of a structure, but it was very difficult to. We didn't really have it set up internally for that to happen. And so I wasn't able to take a break. And so it really, really took a toll on me mentally. And so because I was aware of that, I didn't want that to happen this time. And so I put things in place where we hired someone that would be my in-between to keep me updated whilst I'm away. I restricted her to just 1-page updates whilst I was away. And so she used to give me updates on activities that was going on every week. So I was able to take a step back and take a break. And then now that I'm back, I schedule time for myself. Like I block it out. And I don't have to tell you that that's what I'm scheduling time for. So my team is listening. They'll be like, oh, when I take time off for a whole afternoon, now they know what I'm doing. Like there's some days where it's like, my husband would be like, you look tired, that you need to chill. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to go to the spa tomorrow. So I'll block out the whole afternoon for the spa. I'll drop off my kids with my sister, because I feel like I'm much better for the company and I'm a much better mother if I'm good to myself. Correct. And so that's something that I'm learning. It's still difficult. I still sometimes need someone outside to look at me and tell me, Folake, you need a break. Yeah. But it's something that I'm learning and figuring out. And I think when you become a mother, you realize that nobody knows what they're doing. We're all just winging it and figuring it out as it. Yeah.
Oh, I can imagine. No, thank you for sharing that. Yeah. And I love that you said you're being intentional to like schedule time out for yourself. And even just the vulnerability to say that you're still figuring that out. Sometimes it may not even come naturally, but someone to say, aren't you tired? Don't you actually need to rest? And sometimes we kind of just need to get to that point in our lives where these things should become like very like knee-jerk reactions to us, like when our body feels exhausted or when your sleeping habits are changing. Essentially, you just realize I actually need a break. I love that you said you've merged your personal calendar with your work calendar. And that's interesting because, okay, for instance, if someone is working a 9 to 5 and they have a separate business on the side, you kind of want to like separate everything, but it can get so blurry and like one is suffering. So how do you actually find a way to like make sure that both of your lives, essentially what I'm trying to say is that I feel everything works in synergy. You can't necessarily separate it. So if you have a meeting from 10 to 12, but you put in your personal calendar from 12 to 2, I'm going to the spa, that's part of the process. And from 3 to 4, you continue working. You can't really separate it. It's like work is just so intertwined with your life. So I love that. That's actually a solution that you provided for our audience. And yeah, with motherhood, thank you for sharing that. I'm sure like so many women that are listening are just like, yeah, actually, these are the things I need to do better for myself. And would you say that in this season of motherhood, would you say that it has changed your vision of ambition? Would you say that you find yourself still very driven and wanting to grow? Or do you feel that sometimes when that season comes, that perception is sort of shifted because of children?
So I think you just have to be very, very honest with yourself what your priorities are, because there will be moments where there are conflicts. Before I started working, I read this book called Career Advice for Ambitious Women. And it's written by Mrs. Moneypenny. I don't know if she still does, but she used to write for the FT. And one of the key things I took out of there was be true about your priorities. Is your priority to be hands-on and be there for everything for your children? Or is your priority to make money to afford them the lifestyle that you want them to have? Sometimes those two things coexist, but there are going to be occasions where you have a big meeting and your child has a performance at school. And that is when you have to be clear about those priorities. And you have to be honest with yourself. And this is an internal thing that you have to, because no matter what decision you make, people will always look at you somehow. And so it has to be a personal thing. For me, I am very clear that at the stage my children are at, I want to be there. And so there's some days that I have to think, okay, can my co-founders do something for me instead of me showing up? Or maybe I show up a little bit later because I have to do this thing first. And so it's just really being very, very clear on your priorities. And it's not an easy thing. It's a constant battle, because there's some situations where you feel like the company could be a bit further on if you just put in that extra work as opposed to spending that extra time with your child. But it is what it is. Yeah. Like, I've chosen, I have no regrets. Yeah. And I have a fantastic team. The three of us are very, very family oriented as well. So it's like, if you make a decision to do something with your family as opposed to do work related, we all understand. And so the rest of us are happy to pick up the slack when we need to.
No, that's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. And there's nothing like just having like your team support you in the different phases of life that you're in. And I like that you said, at a point in your life, you have to come and decide what is it that I actually want. And many people don't like to confront that. It's very difficult, because then again, it's also revealing of almost like identity. It's like, okay, well, in this phase of my life, if someone said, actually, I want to be that big career person and I want to maybe just find maybe my family members to help with my kids, does that make you a bad person? I definitely will say no, it doesn't. But these things are actually real. So I'm happy that you've been very transparent and vulnerable to share it, and for our audience, women who are listening, to know that it's actually okay. Like, seasons change in life. So thanks for sharing that. And question, for people who are listening and they are big on data, they don't know where to begin. Folake, what advice would you give them? I want to start a data aggregation company. I have zero clue where to start. I've not been as lucky to find fantastic teammates as yourself. I don't have work experience in risk management. Where do I begin?
In Nigeria, you have to decide what you want the end to be, or what question are you trying to answer with that data. Everywhere else, not everywhere else, I guess in high income countries, you can decide, let me just pull data and I'll figure it out later on. We don't have that luxury. Everyone is looking, how are you going to start making money immediately? So for us, we're trying to understand the security landscape. That was the first question, or first exam question we were trying to understand. So what are the different data points that we need to gather to answer that? Some of this data already exists, and so plug into those APIs. Some of these don't exist. So how do we create that data channel to pull that data and make sense of it? So I think it's just being very, very clear on what you want the output to be, or the insights you're trying to gather, and then working backwards and identifying what are the data points that you need to gather.
Awesome. Thank you, Folake, for that. And just before we round up, I ask every guest this: what is your favorite quote and why?
Yes, I watched a few of your episodes. I knew it was coming, even though I still could not think of a favorite quote. What kept coming to my mind were some lyrics. So recently, there's a song that keeps resonating with me. I heard it at the background of someone's Instagram post, and I was like, I love this. And then I added it to my Spotify and forgot about it. And then when I was talking to a friend recently about the juggling of like work and kids and everything, and how I'm in my era where I'm trying to put myself first and everything. And she's like, oh, listen to this song. So it's called Live More, Love More by Cat Burns. And I think the chorus, I'm not going to sing, I'll just say the chorus for you. The chorus is, if there's something you want to do, just do it. Don't let your head stop your heart from moving. If there's someone you want to talk to them. Who knows where we'd be if we lived more and loved more. And I think it just resonates with this point in my life where it's like, just live, just do what you need to do and what makes you happy.
No, that's extremely profound. And thank you for sharing that. I'm going to actually find the song and listen to it. But no, Folake, this has been so amazing having you here. We've learned so much about Towntalk Solutions and what you're building. I'm sure my audience has that amazed. Like, it's just nice to have you here on the show. So thank you for joining us. Follow Towntalk Solutions on everything data, as you've heard Folake explain, and stay tuned about the interesting product offerings that they have. Thank you for joining. Bye.